Okay, Treasurer report, we got Robinson report, anybody have any business changes?
I move it, accept it. It's what change was in the tenants.
Okay, Bruce is here. No. Bruce, very quiet, good, okay. One favor of accepting the December minutes, say yes, aye. All opposed? Okay, I don't see Al here for treasury report, move on to Gail Knight.
Okay, we didn't hold a steering committee meeting in December. Busy. Our 53rd annual Christmas stroll events were very popular this year, and we received many compliments. The decorated golf cart parade was successful, and more people are interested in joining in the next year. We thank OVA for their donation goods and music, and the CONM Fire Department for transporting Santa, and also Peter Hansen and Beacon Gardens for their help with the decorated Christmas trees. I have sent a thank you note to the Barnstable DPW for their help in decorating the 3 large trees with Christmas lights again this year, as well as notes to all of the town departments for their assistance. Christmas Charities Fund. We presented $1,800 each to the Cape Cod Times Needy Fund and to the Salvation Army on December 14th. We have received approximately 2,400 more since then in the Christmas charities donations, so we will be sending an additional 1,200 each. This makes the total donation to each organization of 3,000 for this year. That's a little over last year, which is great. We are making final plans for our 16th annual Chocolate Fest to be held on Saturday, February 11th, with the main event being the baking contest to be held at the Osterville Library. We are also planning our winter cocktail party at a place and date to be determined. Respectfully submitted by Gail Knight.
Thank you.
Yeah, hey, great. Yeah.
Yes.
What do we want to jump into? I mean, I think folks are following the bouncing ball, the newest contractual / financial related issues with this project, right? So I think somewhere around the halfway point of December, Avangrid asked the DPU to cancel their legally binding contract signed in the spring, the power purchase agreements. They asked for that to be dismissed in a hope that they can possibly then be part of a solicitation that the state's running this April for more wind as part of like the 5,600 megawatts that needs to be accomplished and online by 2030. The DPU responded, even working with, I think, 2 players, namely the governor outgoing, the governor incoming, who wanted to see something positive happen. And the DPU said, no, these contracts are in force as of this Friday. So there's this past Friday is when they responded to Avangrid's request to cancel them. My general sense is that Avangrid is going to continue to do what they said they were going to do, which is continuing the permitting process, continue having the staff on board, having the open houses, for instance, that are scheduled here over the next 3 months to happen, even though there's more question marks, there's more unknowns injected into the process presently than there were, let's say, 2 or 3 months ago. And so I really don't know how this is going to break. I know that the opposition from some folks in this room was based more on some environmental concerns and local, economic concerns, but I think what we're seeing play out mostly is larger macroeconomic terms. And I could be wrong, I could be misreading it, but I generally get the sense that the DPU is hopefully doing right by the ratepayers of the state of Massachusetts, being like, hey, you signed a contract, you said 7 point something cents per kilowatt hour. We'd really like to see that happen because only 8 or 9 months have intervened. What's your problem? But I think that's probably on the state level a little bit, I'd assume, of posturing to make sure that everybody knows that the incoming governor is serious about doing right by the ratepayer. I can't imagine, we talked about the bumper stickerification of this project. Is it a done deal or is it not a done deal? Right? This is a perfect example of it not being a done deal. This is not, they're right now saying that way it looks on their books, it's not going to pencil out over 20 years. So as far as the company who's trying to do this, this is a non-viable economic situation for them. What could possibly happen? I guess there is examples in the past of effectively a state utility oversight group finding a company like Avangrid, a large number, I don't know what that is, but then releasing them from the contract and then letting them rebid so that, you know, a pound of flesh is taken or something like that. That's, I mean, I'm not as, I know we've got some sophisticated market watchers in this group, so if any of these characterizations don't seem to line up with what you guys have been reading, I'd like to hear more about it. But Avangrid plans to be here, let's say, for instance, later this month, I think it's the 19th, right?
Yes,
I think it's the 17th, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I think their general bet is along the lines of that they're going to have to pay, they're going to have to make some concession, and then the state and the utilities will have to make some concession, and that Avangrid, and then, I mean, this is me guessing, but then this thing effectively will get canceled on paper and then be rebid in the spring on the schedule that the state presently is following, which is mostly about trying to hit specific emissions targets by 2030 based off of a number of megawatt hours that are being produced by renewable energy in the state. So that's my sense of it. So I feel like more unknowns injected, mostly on the financial sort of contractual legal end of things. But I don't necessarily feel like this is a death knell for the project and its potential landing here at Dowson's. I mean, just from my own, this is just me reading stuff, right? And I think I've reiterated in this room, there's things like, we know who the administration is in DC, we know who the incoming administration now is in Boston, we know what the law is that we're trying to particularly hit by 2030 to 2050. And I think there's a lot of folks up there on the state level and federal level who are all in and will probably end up going to find a way to make sure that this happens. That's my reading of it in general. And I'd be happy to talk more about this particular one or any aspect of Avangrid if that doesn't match up with the way you guys. Yes,
I have a question about, I don't know if you can answer it. Is the town council willing to wait to vote on a host community agreement until things settle down?
That is totally on hold. Yep, that's great. Thank you. I meant to mention that. HCA 3, which is just a little bit of the way that the town staff refers to it, being third HCA, those discussions are on hold. And yeah, and we will have a discussion before. So there won't be a vote at the town council level to retract authorization, like to go in. Remember, I voted my very first vote really on this, obviously, was the vote to authorize the town manager.
Yeah, you voted.
With that?
Well voted.
Yeah. And then, so there's not going to be like a vote to retract it. It's just known by all parties that they're no longer continuing the HCA conversation until this. There are staff conversations, however, going on about Avangrid's responses to the town's letter back.
Well, Avangrid is required to respond to every point raised by every single entity, person, group that public response.
So I just want to put it, I'm really glad you asked the question, but that was an oversight, but I want you to, so if you start, so the HCA conversations are not happening. However, conversations supposedly about the response from Avangrid to the town's letter about the environmental notification form are supposed to happen.
Is Avangrid talking to the town about their response to the ENF?
Oh, I don't think so. I don't think so. But
be,
eventually it's going to come.
Yeah.
And I just don't want, I'm just trying to add that in to being like, oh, you heard it came. It's not an aspect of an ongoing HCA conversation, which I have talked with now.
So just may I make a second point?
Sure.
None of us who are working in for Dell's Landing misunderstand, don't understand the whole law about, renewable energy by 2030, that whole thing. We understand it's going to happen. We're not fighting wind.
Yeah.
What we are saying is that there's a much better way to export the electricity from future wind farms. Just so that you know that, for example, the Barrack suggestion to build a backbone for all these companies, so they can just plug their windmills in, and there's one landing point, probably in an industrialized zone, and not throwing lines all over Nantucket into resort villages. I mean, it's just absurd that they want to take that control the way they do. But anyway, and we're also going to respond to the York Ocean Energy EIR, which is really upsetting on a lot of levels. But anyway, that will all come out, Paul, at our meeting on the 17th.
Okay, cool. Yeah.
So they'll make our position very clear there.
Yeah.
Thank you for agreeing to be there.
I have a quick process question because I was. When there's an HCA agreement, when you voted to do that, according to Mark, that's done now in it's confidential. Because you're not rescinding that authority to enter the HCA agreement or town Avangard conversations under that veil of confidentiality.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to say yes as a matter of law. And it would be really great for Mark to come back here and do what he had said he would do. And you know, I believe that he was going to do this. We just haven't asked back. Say, how might you amend this process so everything doesn't have to be under the cloak of blackness?
Yeah, right. Okay. Yeah. All right. Yeah. No, I do not have any insight into that. I will be seeing Karen Miller and Charlie McLaughlin this week. And so I think that's and Mark, obviously. So I think that's a great question. Because I do not know how that would be parsed out and what would fall under and what would seem. Yeah, we definitely are in a hold. And you know that that's happening. Yeah, I mean, it's pretty informal, so it'd be to me.
There'll be two moments.
Yeah, I think we're getting into a little bit of like prognosticating on stuff that can change dramatically in month, maybe. And maybe the incoming administration has a plan that we don't really know. Like, for instance, obviously the new lieutenant governor, it was the former mayor of Salem, right? And Salem now has a big part of the developing New England sort of regional sort of business of wind. And he's going to want to make sure that those sort of industrial promises that she made about her harbor ultimately happen. So I think we're going to find a new administration coming in, possibly looking at things through a different lens. And so I think the things are going to change a bunch. And I think the onus is on me that, like, if I get wind of the fact that, like, but I feel like it's probably, they're really going to try hard to get Avangard to get this thing canceled. And if that means it also might go to courts. And so that's another.
They have 2 weeks to appeal.
Is that right?
To Superior Court. Yeah.
There's a chance, because I think there is some sort of interpretation of whether or not financing is supposed to assist or help out, and there's Avangard's got their interpretation, states got theirs, and that might be a point in which so it could go a legal route. It could go a political route, and so I think it's a bouncing ball. But as far as I will make a promise here that the HCA conversations, potential conversations, would not restart without this body being made.
I'm curious, did you read the EPU finding dated the 30th in its entirety?
I definitely, so the 30th as in December 30th, as in last Friday.
Yeah.
No, I read the coverage.
Well, I'm just curious. I mean, one of my concerns, I think we would all feel this way if you were to go in and buy a car or a house. If you signed a contract with the dealer, a couple of weeks before delivery, said, you know what, I can't sell you that Honda, for what I told you I would. You wouldn't be too happy about that. You'd say, you got out of the contract. I think some of that's going on. But even if you take at face value that, there's been an increase in inflation and costs, et cetera. They did sign the contract 6 months ago. If you read the DPU order, and you look at footnote 23, it specifically talks about, and this is certainly the way I feel, and a lot of people and the DPU and the mass utilities, Avangard claimed that they had all these additional costs but they didn't share any information. They wouldn't provide any net present value calculation showing this is why the project's no longer financeable. They didn't say that they've been turned down by anybody. As the court said at DPU, they were self-serving comments, statements made by Osterville. They want all these contracts changed, but they provided no proof whatsoever, that their costs were going up, or that anybody was unwilling to finance the project. It goes to the reliability, the trust that I think the public, I'd like to think the town has in signing contracts with a group like this. And I think, the DPU called them out, said, listen, you're making these claims, you haven't substantiated any of it. And that's why DPU made the decision that it did.
Yeah.
The other thing is, in any of these finance projects, even if interest rates have gone up and it costs them more today to finance the project, as Governor Baker said, these are 20-year agreements. Corporations all the time sign these agreements, get refinanced. We know that interest rates will revert back at some point in time. They've been artificially low for way too long. They've gone up, they'll go back down again. They will go up over 20 years. If you're telling me that a sophisticated organization like Osterville didn't put that kind of stuff into projections, that really worries me. But even if they did, are you telling me that when Osterville goes back and refinances the project 5 years from now and gets a lower cost, are they going to turn around to us, the utility players in the states, and say, you know what, we've now refinanced the project, so we told you it was more expensive for us 5 years ago, we need to charge you more, we're going to charge you less. It ain't happening. It ain't happening. So that's why Baker said, look, it's a 20-year project. You don't back out of a project 6 months after you signed it. You're sophisticated financiers. You know what happens. It's clear to me they're just trying to get enough pound of flesh out of the utilities and the ratepayers. So that's the kind of stuff that's going on, and that goes to the heart of, is this the kind of organization company the town wants to be doing business with? Not for one farm, but for free.
Yeah.
Our coast.
Yeah, well, this is part of it. I feel like we can do it sort of. Hey, sir, we got Pam Paul. I don't know.
I'm Chuck Savage.
Hey, Chuck. Okay, sorry. Yeah.
Wanted to ask you something that's a little bit unrelated to this,
Okay, sure.
and that is, when these other two wind organizations connected, and the ones that are going on Credible Beach, they made a payoff to the town. And originally I thought it was 18 million, and I was here one night and I heard it was 30 million. And can you find out for us what happened to that money? And in other words, did it go into the general fund? I'm not suggesting anything nefarious happened, but although one could argue that whenever you give money to the government, it's always a nefarious result. But I would like to know what happened to it, because if I were running things, this is part of my question, I guess. And I knew that I had a big sewer project I had to do in this town. It was going to cost millions of dollars, and I was going to have to burden everybody in the town, all of the citizens, with this thing. I'd be putting that money aside, and in hopefully having it earn a little bit of interest or something, so that I could have money available for that project. And maybe there are constraints, because I know that budgets and public funding are constrained by very complex rules and regulations. So maybe that sort of common sense thinking is not permissible. But I'd like to know, and I think for the benefit of not just me, but the benefit of everyone, what did they do with that money?
Yeah. Bob, I feel like you've been in receipt more recently. Did you get HCA 1 and 2 from Lynn, or did you?
Well,
yeah.
The town didn't post those even after that's just don't get posted, but they're public information.
Yeah.
And so I found one on the web somewhere else, and I read one of them. I don't know if you did.
No,
I don't
the
think
responses to the wasn't the
But you weren't requesting the HCA.
But the age, I don't think the payments even start for 2 years, and I think it rolls in over 20 years.
Right.
Yeah.
So I don't even
Yeah.
think there's probably as many.
16 million.
16 for 20 years.
20 years.
And I think it's a couple of years before the first payment.
Yeah. Now it's-
Well, I think it would be helpful, enlightening, to know what this financial arrangement was and what they're going to do.
So at our meeting on the 17th, comprehensive study of the proposed payments to the town, so if you can make it on the 17th, we'd love to have you there. It's very comprehensive and enlightening. Here on January 17th at 6:30, it's 2 nights before Avangrid's meeting. 6:30, that's correct.
We'll have that, but I'll also, because I've thrown numbers around, not loosely, but like, because I've been given the range of numbers from property tax and other things that are projected, as well as the potential savings. And so those numbers have not been like, oh yeah, here's like, I think we're getting to a moment this spring where we'll probably with Vineyard Wind, I think the town is going to generate a dollar.
First payment.
Yeah, or they're going to receive that, but they're also going to be able to be like, if we had done this portion of the sewer without Avangrid's role in paying for it, the town would have had this dollar amount. That number is going to come out, and that's an important one.
Yeah, if I could follow up, I'm going to disrupt you, but I follow up to that because that's an interesting point you raised. And I don't know quite how to articulate this question, but I discussed this, I think Peter Hansen and I discussed.
Okay.
And that is, we're being told constantly, this is going to save us money. This is going to save us money. And how do you quantify that? In other words, what would the cost be if you were going to dig the hole without the people with windmills,
Right.
versus what the cost is now that you got the people with the windmills? And when they say save us money, are they saving the people that are going to be abutting the abutters to this project? Are they saving? What do they mean by who's the us?
Us is the town. It's the town.
Yeah. Okay.
In general.
And how does that get? This is what the part I can't articulate. Is how do you quantify that in terms of each and every citizen in this town? In other words, I guess that gets us down to how is this whole thing being financed? How are we all paying for this? I don't mean this project in Osterville. I mean the project townwide.
Yeah.
And how does that translate into savings for each of us who are the taxpayers of this?
May I, in August 2022, Mark Milner produced a report on the financing of the sewering project.
Yeah.
It's available on the town's website, and it breaks it all down the way you're asking about. So I went through that. It's pretty interesting. They're talking about a debt exclusion override for fiscal year 2025. So prepare to pay much more in taxes for a few years.
And that's another thing that I think I wanted to ask you about. I don't mean to monopolize it.
But I think this is perfect for this side room, and if everybody's comfortable with your this president, then
Yeah, but we have a few people that have been, we have a lot of people like pretty much remain silent. Few of us here tonight. I wanted to ask this too, which really is bothersome to me about this whole thing, and that is that if you're going to say we want an override so we can tax people more to pay for this project, my question is the town, which I consider, this is pretty radical thinking, well, I consider the town to be some entity that's over here, and I'm over here. When I say me, I mean everybody. We're all separate from this monolithic entity known as the town, which I think has become sort of a self-perpetuating bureaucratic machine, just like the rest of the government. And my problem with all of this is, what changes, what reductions are being made by, quote, the town, end quote, in order to help finance this project. In other words, we're being told that there is some organization out there that's threatening to sue the town of Barnstable. We don't get this sewer in the ground. And I absolutely agree with, and I certainly accept what the 3 Bays organization. I can't remember his name.
Clean Water Building.
Yeah. And I agree with what he's saying. I accept what he's saying. And what he's saying is true, that we need to do something to protect the bays. And I get that. But we're being told that this is being forced on us. We're going to need to do this. It's going to cost us X number of millions of dollars, and everybody's going to have to pay for it. My question is to the people that run the town, this is maybe a question I should have asked for Mark Ellis, is what savings is he making? Ain't him necessarily, but throughout the town, in order to try to tighten their belts over the long term, try to accommodate this and reduce the cost of all of it. One night he was here, and unless I misheard him, this was about, I don't know, 6 or 7 months ago, he was here with the president of the city council. And unless I misheard him, he said that we need more programs. And I was somewhat flabbergasted. Because I'm thinking of what more programs can we possibly need in the town of Osterville. I'm pretty sure that's what he said. And if we're going to be embarking on this very expensive adventure of sewering our town, and we're going to be expecting that we're going to, all of us in this room and everywhere else in this town are going to have to carry that burden, we should be looking at reduction of programs in the town of Osterville, a reduction of staff, and reduction of all of these things in order to accommodate it. I just think that's common sense. That's my view of it. But you know, that's the way I feel about it. But my question is what accommodations is the town bureaucracy, namely the executive branch, town manager, what are they planning in terms of financial mitigation in order to reduce the burdens on all of us?
Yeah. I mean, I know that folks are working furiously to find every federal and state primarily and county, but to a lesser extent, source of funding to reduce end users' load, like citizen, Barnstable citizen. And so I think the focus has been in that regard. I do not know, Chuck, about what you're really getting at, though, is about whether, you know, increased programs, increased staff, increased, you know, town budget, which means increased taxes. And so, but I don't know about training exercises that might be presently going on. So that's a great question.
If I run the town council, that would be, I'd be asking that question. Not that you're not going to, but I mean, I'd be asking that question. And asking him what efforts are being made by every department in this town over the next 10 to 20 years, however long this project is going to take, to reduce their expenses and their budgets, and to condense their operations in order to pay for this particular program.
But I think from that font of idea is probably the nexus point of the wind and the sewer trying to go together. You know, I think that's just thinking out of the box. I'm pretty sure those ideas came from this room, people involved in the town council, you know, in Jimmy Crocker's time, who was sort of like, there's a thing here and there's a thing there, and maybe there's a way that piggybacking can lead to savings. So that's another, I think, example that is legitimate about the town working hard to try to reduce. Yes, Jason.
There's no need. What? There's no need. So why do it? Why risk gals of beach and why take it away? And so many people who use it year round. It's not just a summer destination. I've met so many people and had the pleasure of having long intro conversations with over the last couple months, since August.
Since John sent his
And down the beach is not just on the beach, but parking is also a year-round destination. Handicapped people. Yes, it is important to do, but handicapped people. But the parking lot itself is a destination. And this company, I get your macro comments, and I agree with it. I'm all for wind energy, but they have other alternatives. So why should we be encouraging them when this is not financially? If you're going to just look at the numbers, this is not benefiting us. It's not. So why encourage it?
here. I want to follow with Chuck also. Just thinking about, well, let's leave having grid out of it and about what would it cost for the sewers and how we're going to pay for it. Also, like the other questions, if they're not involved, how does that adjust or change the actual lines that the town is willing to pay for? I've always been under the opinion that if that company doesn't come through this beach, we wouldn't have sewage down from the town center to beyond that. Because the bang for the buck doesn't make any sense. The amount of sewage coming out of those homes.
Right, yeah, I
Here
hear
around.
that's accurate.
I'd like to know I've asked this a number of different ways. Okay. Would those lines be coming through our village? Wasn't there? And if they're only paying us $800,000 a year, it seems ridiculous. I mean, if we're gonna rebid this contract, I don't get really paying for it. Okay, it should be somewhere in 50 million, somewhere there. They should actually be paying for what they're doing for the village and actually come up with a larger point. Said, I think you give it to them. But that's just me.
Yeah, no, and I do feel like that is the attitude within the town hall is that HCA 3 would have had a much larger dollar amount attached to it. But that I think was about to happen and is now on hold presently.
Well, it's really what's going on.
And I'm not certain.
Because they said $16 million, the town of always said.
Yeah.
So, I think that's what it is.
Yeah.
Yeah,
that's right. I mean, I sort of been enjoying this can stay free flow. I mean, yeah.
Well, I'm not doing, I just want to make sure.
Yeah.
We're going to go the subject, the school and that kind of stuff.
Oh, yeah. About the school. Yeah. So I've definitely had a bunch of conversations with folks and I think you and I have caught up a little bit about this, but maybe we haven't. Apologize if not, which is right. We've gotten to a point with the Osterville Village, the Jim Crocker Park. I don't know. Did it have historically had one name? I feel like I call it a couple of different things. Yeah.
I think we've said Jimmy Crocker.
The Jim Crocker. So the Crocker Park. Couple elements done, and now we're going to see 5 more elements sequence over the next little bit. And those elements are the playground itself between the tennis courts and the AT&T building, the removal of the community basketball center in center field of the softball field, the replacement of that with publicly available bathrooms, an internal paved surface of some sort for walking, and what's the last one? Landscape, new trees, perimeter trees. I haven't fully figured out how it's going to get sequenced through the budget and which elements go first and which ones go last. It seemed pretty clear that the playground and the removal of the center field building and the bathrooms are the highest priority and feel like they're already in the budgetary discussion for going into the next fiscal year. So that's the rub, and we've talked about that. There are restrictions on CPC funds when it comes to recreation, but then there's some creative ways of sort of I think of how we characterize the assets that we're develop there, and that it's not. But that is really something that I don't fully understand yet, Suzanne. But I definitely know that. The project that you see before you right now is not the final version of it. The final version should be pretty great. And we'll also see possibly some changes though in this upcoming season. No teams or no leagues chose to play this year, but that was because the field wasn't available until October 10th. And so that was the end of most seasons. They were already booked. So, and as of my last conversation with folks, there had not been any outreach so of all the leagues on the Cape were sent a heads up like, hey, there's a new adult league softball field in let us know if you ever want to hit with it. And I don't think anybody in the leagues has responded by that. But that will potentially, change. There's about 22 parking spaces there along First Avenue, and then that's it. And so pretty sure that adult league softball game is somewhere between probably a dozen people per side. So,
There's another outreach, sorry,
Yeah.
another outreach gonna go on.
Yeah,
To see-
yeah, exactly.
That's the reason we bought, we
Yeah.
built that, is because the recreation department said that's what we need most. So it'd be sort of a shame if we don't have
Yeah,
anybody come out.
Yeah, no, they're aware that they didn't get any takers this fall, and so, yeah, in fact, they were planning on re-engaging it, and I think they don't really start up until April now.
From what I understand, there's already funds been available and allocated for tearing down the building.
Yeah.
And the other things about the issues. We also had one area that hasn't been discussed, but brought up a couple of times. On the original plan, was going to be an outdoor hybrid basketball, street hockey, somewhere in way
Right
left
field.
left
Oh,
field. As you pull into the new parking lot,
Yeah.
way out by where the facing the entrance, the building's keep going.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that was not in my last.
Yeah, I
conversation.
saw that, and I think that's been dropped somehow,
Yeah.
but that was in the original.
I think it got dropped when like the big community building itself, and the pollinator garden and the outdoor stage, and those elements got dropped. That particularly paved surface multi-use was, got dropped as well. Yeah,
We were in the process, so if there's something that we can do, maybe
Yeah.
if that's still possible.
right. Yeah. I'm happy to really talk about anything. It's like one of the things we had on the list for tonight was LCP / Osterville Village. The zoning, right? And talking about like right, I felt like that was.
Well, we had it as a PowerPoint.
Oh, okay.
If he brought that up, was that?
I always have.
Oh.
Never crossed.
Anyone who wanted that, we were talking about.
I'm gonna go ahead and post the 35 Scudder as a Cape Cod Commission hearing this Thursday, right before the town council meeting. There's a town council meeting. It is not in person, in case anybody's interested in coming Thursday night. That's on Zoom.
Why is it back on Zoom?
I'm not 100% certain. The event just came out like 3 hours ago. Yeah.
Before you get off
They
the,
probably started doing it.
Yeah, Bob.
before you get off the Cape Cod Commission.
Yeah.
Guess I'll ask you as a counselor, if you would consider reaching out to the Cape Cod Commission. That meeting, which a lot of citizens mentioned about the Scudder, 35 Scudder
Yeah,
property.
yeah.
And basically, there's an overlap between that and the town council meeting where changes to the zoning and Hyannis, also another very important issue are being discussed. And the last Cape Cod Commission meeting ran, I think, almost 3 hours. So the public comment sessions are going to overlap, and it's going to deprive the public of the opportunity, those who are interested in 2 issues, believe it or not, there are people who are interested in 2 issues, participate in both those meetings. And it was requested at the December 20th Cape Cod Commission meeting that
That's
be
when they funded,
postponed
yeah.
until mid-January at least, putting Betty Leckie, one of the other counselors. When the meeting ended, the chairs just simply said, oh, let's have a vote on moving it to January 5th, which was absurd. I mean, the whole thing was, this is over the holiday period. We really have hundreds of documents
Yeah.
as of December 20th. Since December 20th, there have been posted additional documents, revised regulatory agreements, which people, including the council, the Cape Cod Commission subcommittee meeting members have not even probably had a chance to look at.
Yeah.
Yet they're planning to have another meeting and possible vote this Thursday. At the same time, the town is going to be discussing zoning changes. It would be very simple. The Cape Cod Commission postpone that meeting to at least mid-January, if not later, which is what every single member of the public, including town council, asked for on the 20th. And the chair
Yeah.
didn't even acknowledge it. He just moved it to the 5th. So I guess I would ask you as a counselor to use your powers of persuasion to ask the Cape Cod Commission to do the reasonable thing, which would be to postpone that hearing the 5th until some later date.
All right, yeah. I will connect with Betty Leckie, get more background as well. Find out what I can about why everyone was like, let's do it in January, mid-January, and then it's set out the 5th.
It's got to be
It's
done
a
pretty
big
quickly
concern.
because it's Thursday. So
Yeah.
I think it's the only fair and reasonable thing. Commission to do otherwise, they're knowingly prohibiting members of the public from participating in
And
both.
that's right, sure. Yeah. Joe, yeah.
What's the issue with the 35 Scudder?
Yeah.
What is the project?
That's the right now, it's right at Twin Brooks Golf Course behind the convention center at West End Rotary. INS.
Oh,
Across.
or at my end.
Yeah, INS, yeah. So I don't, you're good on that subject as well.
Yeah, no, I know,
Okay.
you're talking about 30 bucks car out here.
Right.
And what
yeah.
do you have there for the kid?
Yeah, you're on the committee, yeah, where does that stand right now? I started thinking the paper today or yesterday. Yeah, there's a vote coming, yeah.
So I'm on the Safe Swim board. It's currently, and the regulatory agreement is pending consideration by the Cape Cod Commission subcommittee. Then it would go to the Cape Cod Commission. The commission, there was 1,000 pages in the record, and they gave the public 2 business days to read the 1,000 pages and the draft regulatory agreement. That's why kind of the entire universe was kidding. You people probably haven't read this thing. They actually just the other day issued a revised regulatory draft agreement without a red line, where everyone can go back and sort of just divine what they changed for the holiday. You know, it's just not. It works if you're trying to satisfy a developer that pays a law firm and can have associates to throw at it, but it doesn't work if you're trying.
The other thing that's happened on that, several members of the public had asked the Cape Cod Commission to address the questions that the public has raised. And I can't remember the young woman's name, Belozzo, Cape Cod Commission. They said, yes, we'll do that. We'll put together a spreadsheet and we will log all the questions and respond and provide responses. And then they never did. And they kind of came back, said, we just haven't had time to do that. And there's several members of the public who have repeatedly asked for that, put it at the most recent meeting, and the Cape Cod Commission just response. I mean, it's just again amazing that all these questions that have been asked by members of the public, the Cape Cod Commission subcommittee has just completely ignored.
Friday afternoon.
Yes.
I got a couple other things. You presentation, right? Yeah. So I think everybody knows do office hours every Thursday downstairs. Every other Thursday, day of council meetings from 2 to 5. So I definitely try to make sure that everybody has my cell phone and email address about anything. But that's also a good chunk of time every 2 weeks where folks can come in with no appointment. I'm going to go. I think everyone's seeing the sort of the DEP related stuff in regards to the watershed versus the potential septic. I mean, the Title V changes that are a big part of the conversation. I've not been to Mass DC, the septic testing center out of Joint Base Cape Cod. I'm going to go up there next week. I don't know if anybody's ever taken that tour, but it's effectively a place in which we test the innovative alternative systems that might one day replace the Title V technology that we've been using since the 90s. It'd be interesting. You're taking a tour of toilets pretty much. I think an interesting thing that's about to start up is there's a town government class that is offered. That's an academy that runs for 12 meetings on Tuesday nights, starting on the 24th and goes for 12 weeks. And it's on all the operations of the town government. And I'm going to do it because I know that I can benefit from it. I don't know if space is still available, but I think that would be for the type of interested characters we have in this room. That I think that maybe even some of you have done it. I know Jen was sort of like, yeah.
I think
Oh, you guys actually signed up? Okay. Okay. Hector will be there. Okay, great.
I've done it twice. I can graduate. Second class. My wife decided to do it 3 years later. So I did again with her. So, and it was amazing how much changed in 8 years, but it was simply technology that the town was using and stuff. And it is a very good program and well worth it.
Yeah. All right. It's good
May
to
I
hear.
ask the question about the septic decision?
Yeah.
Has the town considered de-scoping the sewering project and putting the burden to upgrade to alternative or innovative septics on the backs of property owners? In other words, because they can't afford the sewer system they devise. The state comes down and says, everybody has a septic, has to upgrade. I mean, it's gonna cost my husband and I about $35,000 anyway, and we're scheduled for sewering. It just seems to me that one approach with this DEP decision would be, okay, we're gonna de-scope sewering. And if you own property in the watershed, you need to upgrade your septic system. Have they talked about that as an alternative to, say, running a sewer line through the village?
Yeah. And I think the sewer conversation, right, is a 30-year project, and we're fairly.
But the state's saying you have to have it done in 20, you can get a watershed permit.
Right, yeah.
So I think the 30-year thing is going out the window.
Yeah.
So, to me, if they don't consider that idea, they're not looking at all the alternatives. Just a thought. But it's obvious that they haven't been thinking along this.
Well, I mean, we still don't have anything that gets down to the milliliters per, of nitrogen and phosphorus that's been approved to be the technology. So I feel like to a certain extent, de-scoping sewer with a big question mark of what the IA technology is, it's going to fill that hole, is probably not something.
Well, I read an article in the state weighed in, they said that it's not me. They said that, the state understands the technology is emerging, but they believe, they gave people 5 years
Yeah, right.
to upgrade. People they said, no, the technology's there, whether it's there or not, a whole other question.
Right.
They're not going to kick anybody out of their homes if they don't do this. I doubt if the state will get around to finding everybody, but it just seems to me that with the state coming out with this demand, it just seems like
something that isn't available. Is that what you're saying?
Well, I'm just saying.
what I'm saying is everybody should get their share of getting the nitrogen out of the watershed. And it just seems to me that the state said, okay, everybody has to do it within 5 years. Fine, we'll do it within 5 years. We tell everybody in Barnstable who's not on the sewering project to get their septic upgraded in 5 years. Boom, end of story. Because to tell you the truth, Paul, and I'm sorry, the sewer project is 1.2 billion at this point. And they don't have the money. And I can't see, I don't care how many oven grids come along.
Yeah.
They're not gonna have the money to do what they want to do. And that's simply, it just seems to me that an alternative would be to, everybody has to do something, either upgrade your septic or be on the sewer. So just a thought,
Yeah.
but they're not thinking like that.
I don't think so. Yeah, no.
Why aren't they thinking like that? Wouldn't that be a cheaper way of doing it instead of?
Well, we don't even have enough of these IA systems remotely, right? It would sort of suggest a maturity to the industry that.
Well, the state's the one that suggested people use them.
We got the states threatening that, okay, if you don't get on sewage by a certain year, that in between you have to put these systems. That's what Zenus is saying. It's saying, oh, you'll have to pay what? Again,
Which is right.
he's taking over 90% of the nitrogen out of the water. So to me, that would seem like the cost-effective way of doing this, especially when it comes down to if you're not doing it in 12 years or whatever that thing is, you have to do it for the in-between. The only thing, if you're not only paying $30,000 a month, you're paying the hookup, which would be $2.
Well, like I said, because ours goes out to the plant, we have to have a civil engineer in. It's gonna cost at least $25,000 to reroute the whole house. And who knows where they'll drop the stub. I asked about that. They said, oh, somebody will knock on your door and say, we're putting the stub there. Well, they could put it in a place that's gonna cost us much more than where we think it should go. But the $10,000 assessment, as soon as the sewer line goes by your house, that's a $10,000 bill you have to pay. Maybe you can add it, you can have a lien on your house to pay for it. Who the heck wants to do that? No, my house is paid off. I don't want to have a lien on it.
There's other costs here. There's other costs. They're gonna make you fill up your system with sand, with tanks.
That's why I'm saying it's gonna cost us about $35,000 once the sewer line goes by our house, which is fine. We feel that Cape Cod has really kicked the can down the road for far too long. It needs to be done, and we're happy to do our bit. But there are folks who, aren't being sewered, or maybe they should do their bit too. And you have the state kind of came in and saved you a little bit. and, saying, okay, everyone's gonna do this to the 5 years. Nobody can do it. I mean, there aren't enough contractors in the world. And the technology will come out, but, it just seems to me like it would be a much more sensible way to do this. Anyway, but they're not, they're gonna go for the.
Well, I mean, I think I've heard multiple times that it's a 30-year plan and
But
I
it can't
think
be
it'll be
anymore.
reviews. Yeah, right, yeah. No, I know. But I think the idea though was that there would be a periodic review. And so I think inherent in that suggestion was the scoping or de-scoping. New technologies come online and hopefully prices fall.
That's right. That's what I'm suggesting.
yeah.
But, just a thought, Paul, and
Yeah.
just, the conversation goes forward, my guess is, it's just gonna go for a 20-year watershed. permit. And
I
they'll
think so.
probably, they'll
Yeah.
probably get it,
Yeah.
but it's never way to do it, is what I'm saying.
Well, I think there's one other fun thing, which is like, I mean, besides that, I don't know if your presentation's about Hyannis and zoning or just town run, but I mean, one of the things that I think is pretty interesting about the walkable streets part of stuff promoted or presented in Hyannis is that they're seriously over there considering getting rid of the 2 one-way streets, South Street and Main Street, going back to 2 ways like North Street, and yanking out all the that has some, no pun intended, legs in the conversation these days. I think Jeff Spack, who wrote a great book called Walkable Cities, came and visited the village and has been working a lot with the town staff to imagine different ways to increase economic activity. And I guess there's a lot out there that suggests that people get into certain routines by having to take one ways in long directions, and then they just skip a bunch of stuff. And if you can have 2-way streets, it can dramatically change the flow, the feel, the walkability, as well as the economic activity. So I'm just highlighting it as an idea that it feels like could be 2 summers from now, we might see something like South Street and Main Street running 2 ways with no lights. Yeah.
Well, they used to, back in the.
Yeah.
Guild,
Oh, yeah.
They used to have, in the summertime, from Memorial Day to Labor Day, we went to one-way streets. So South Street and Main Street became as they are now.
Yeah.
And then in the winter on Labor Day, they reverted back to 2-way streets. And then eventually, somebody decided somewhere along the line that it was better to keep them where they are.
Yeah.
And one-way streets year round.
Yeah.
Rather than
Well, that's good to know that there was that period of time that they did that. That hasn't, nobody's brought that up in conversations. If there's a need to ease into it as a thing.
kind of a meaningless but interesting historic fact.
It's actually.
Yeah.
Why don't we move on?
Yeah.
We're gonna get-
I'm gonna go fast. I wanted to just follow up on a conversation that keeps popping up at these meetings about concern in connection with the potential for density development and zoning in connection with the LCP, and should correct me everywhere, and sewer matters. It seems to be sort of an emotional issue for people. People's like passions get up. I am, I think we should be all grounded in facts. One of the things that happens routinely when we talk about zoning, a couple of years ago, Mark Ells challenged everyone to get engaged. And so a lot of us said, okay, right? And now every time we sort of quote and read and cite, we get told, straight talk. Councillor Atzelis loves to say, oh, the misinformation train is running around Osterville. No, it's not, actually. Last time we heard, stray quotes and hyperbole. No, it's not. So I wanted to just try to bring what I think are facts to this, because if you care about it, we should all be thinking in facts. If I have something wrong, I think people should come correct my facts with more facts. I welcome that every time I talk about anything. If something's off, bring it on. So that's the intention in this, is just to say, can we all be factual? And then the other thing I'm told, is often, oh, whatever the town said they didn't mean. I'm going to say this very respectfully. If we can't take to the bank what our town government says, the problem isn't with citizens who are listening to our town government. And I'll leave that there. So this is why I wanted to make this presentation. I think that what the concerns that come up and are conveyed are not hyperbole, they're not stray, and they are not anything to do with misinformation. I welcome somebody to bring back corrected information with cites and facts and transcripts in minutes, if anything we say is wrong. I repeat here that I think the town should be responsible for the words that are uttered by it. Now, I know I'm going to take my blood pressure down and carry on here. So as I and a bunch of us that watch the town very closely have observed, single family zoning is very much in the bullseye. This is a quote from our planning director. Single family residential zoning is a burden to this community, on the public record in a public meeting. In the ADU debate, it was said in a public meeting, the ADU proposal was a, quote, baby step to pushing back on the legacy of single family residential zoning. The town's proposal in that case mirrored a proposal put forward by business interests, which is the typical sort of pattern here. That's also a matter of record, not opinion, that was put forward by the realtors, the business, the realtors, the builders, the chamber, and HAC, that would have allow an ADU to be sort of a duplex by right. In a public meeting, the town staff said to developers, geez, does this get us close enough to multifamily by right? Okay. The town ended up not going in that direction. And the next day there was a sort of a commitment to come back and revisit this investor duplex by right model. Cape Cod Commission similarly has said our current zoning is broken and it has a plan to fix that for you, right? A barrier to changing zoning to increase density is a lack of sewer infrastructure. That's also a matter of public record. Downtown Hyannis is sewered, right? Changes to zoning that would increase density are pending now. It's had a hard time moving forward because of the number of financially interested counselors to get a quorum at the meetings. That's why it's been sort of kicked off for a few meetings. I think it's no coincidence that the town hall is therefore inviting these wind project developers to run infrastructure down our main streets, despite the company's prior criteria to avoid high traffic areas, to avoid business districts, and to avoid highly populated residential areas. I'm going to talk for just a minute about density zoning because it feeds into this. So form-based zoning, I call density zoning because that's what it is in a literal way. That's now pending for downtown Hyannis. It's about moving away from zoning based on use into zoning based on form. Its point is to increase density and height and then reduce the amount of parking that developers have to provide when they provide increased housing. The theory that's been espoused is it's like live, work, play, right? You don't need a car, just walk to the doctor, walk to the grocery store, then go home here on the Cape. I like to use quotes all the time, so I've included here, and I won't take the time to read those to you, but in the town hall's words, you know, what the use is inside is not dictated by zoning. You leave density up to the developer. There'll be no restrictions, and so it will be by right to bring certainty. The way that the town has assumed community support for this density zoning in Hyannis, these are also quotes from a public meeting, was to do a survey, take a community survey about density, take those preferences and turn them into zoning, turn it into by right zoning. The committee member said, geez, so when somebody says, wait, we don't actually like this, we can say, no, we asked you and this is what you said. And staff said, that's exactly right? We did this really big outreach and this is what the majority of people want. We're going to take these preferences and we're going to convert our zoning to reflect those community preferences. This was the survey. This is a literal excerpt from the survey. So this company that the town used, that the Cape Cod Commission uses, that really advances density zoning, put up a bunch of pictures like this. Here's this sterile gray box that's really unattractive, probably from the 60s, with the closed window in the middle of the day. Put that next to this really kind of lovely, you know, golden hour photo and say, where would you rather live? You know, yeah. So a majority of people might pick the pretty picture. This is the community response that the town says, let's take people's preferences, translate your preferences about these kinds of pictures into your assumptions about density zoning. So when I saw this is like the really big outreach, I went and I looked how many people actually answered this question. 140 people did that. The percent of the people in Hyannis and 0.003% of the people in Barnstable. So that was our really big outreach. I attended the workshops on these, and I just put down at the bottom how many people actually showed up. This will tell you, I knew everybody in the room, right? It was like, it wasn't actual outreach. It was like me, Felicia Penn, Tina Carey, a few counselors. Okay. Yes.
Are you saying that there was a townwide survey
Yes.
that only 140 people responded, or?
Yes. That's yes. And you can take this to the bank. This is all facts. Yep. Okay. So this was the really big outreach that when somebody says, wait, what are you doing with our zoning? The town can point back and say,
How did they promulgate this survey?
I believe that the firm that sort of sells density zoning put it together, and they put it out by a survey monkey to like the business improvement district and others in Hyannis, probably the Civic Association.
What, by email or by?
It was an online survey. Yeah, it was a survey monkey. And it was all that. So anyway, that's that. So I think it's important not to confuse, people's impressions of what's a pretty house with people's preferences about what zoning should be where they live, or whether they have a supportive view of sort of turning density over to a developer. This I'm certainly not going to spend time on. I actually made this because it represents how the town does zoning here, okay? I would actually encourage you, I'll post this and go home and actually look at it. The town started talking to the Economic Development Task Force about this density zoning in 2018. In 2019, after the realtor lobby encouraged it in 18, it spent 2 years talking to the Economic Development Task Force, which was self-appointed business interests. And that's also a matter of, it's in the minutes, they were self-appointed. They often did business on personal Zoom accounts. There were no agendas and there were no minutes. You had to ask the town for those after the meetings happened. So even if you really cared about this, you couldn't follow it. You didn't know what was happening. I heard a random comment that there's an economic development task force working on zoning. Can someone tell me about that? Literally, but for that, there wouldn't be awareness that there even was such a thing working on zoning. 2 years later, after the realtor lobby funded training for public officials about it, there started a public process. Leave that. So I'm going to move into the notion of community activity centers. Our town hall has repeatedly stated its intent to move density zoning into community activity centers like Osterville. The slides that I'm going to share, and I'll go quick, were words by our town hall, right? Over the years, saying the same thing over and over and very directly. This move to a density in the Cape Cod Commission designated community activity center, which Osterville is one of, would allow the LCP to conform to the Cape Cod Regional Policy Plan and to be certified. That conformance is not a legal requirement. It's a desire on behalf of Town Hall. The town has the flexibility under the law to set its own vision, its own zoning preferences, and not just sort of follow along what the Cape Cod Commission would like to see. I'll go really quickly here. This goes to moving this density zoning outside of Hyannis where it's currently proposed. So back in 2019, there was an expression by our town staff that says, it's always been our goal to replicate this in other areas of our town. Would say, great, let's replicate this in Osterville. We'll move it, right? 2021, this isn't a response, frankly, to my question. What are you planning on doing with this zoning model? Somebody's question at a meeting I was at, I'm not sure if it was mine. This was described as a more modernized approach it was affirmed, yes, this could be very effective in our other village centers, would look for other opportunities to bring it around, and it would be beneficial to our overall regulatory scheme. Again, in 2021, staff said to the council, we'll make a document available to you that we worked on with the Cape Cod Commission, a form-based code framework that talks about why this tool is a good tool for regulating development in our community centers like Osterville here on Cape Cod. So I just point these out when people say, oh, no, it's just Hyannis, right? It was rebranded as just Hyannis. These are repeated statements over time by senior town officials about their express intent to move this zoning density elsewhere. Cape Cod Commission categorizes 3 villages as sort of one and the same, right? In the Cape Cod Commission's eyes, Barnstable Village, Hyannis, and Osterville are sort of the same for zoning, and they should be treated the same for zoning. All community activity centers should have zoning to get to higher density and multifamily housing, should have inclusionary bylaws. And I've read the third thing 18 times and I don't know what it means. It's like grad school talk, right? But whatever that means. Yes, and I'll post this. I'm just trying to go fast because I'm sure you're all a little fatigued. You know, what is that?
Would be lot size, for example.
Oh,
size
so you
and
can put
setback-
like.
setbacks.
houses on it, yeah.
That's what they mean by that.
Yeah. So that's that. And I'm not schooled in this stuff, so I don't know what some of these terms mean. So I wanted to share also that the Cape Cod Commission has set out its vision for Osterville. I've taken its community activity center and sort of blown up to show you where it maps that out in Osterville. That's where it encourages zoning, density zoning to be had pursuant to its vision that we just spoke of. I blew this up so you can take a closer look. It's identified 390 acres in community activity centers where the town has said it's worked on form-based zoning with the Cape Cod Commission to move to these places. This is where the commission encouraged density zoning and where our town has said, you know, these density zoning tools are a good idea. So you might spend time looking at the map and see how you feel about that.
Zach, these are drawn to where these lines are going, where they came up with this and what the exact map looks in the granular level.
Yeah, it's a computer tool that says, you know, if you have a bank near a post office near a this and a that, we're going to go out and draw your circle and encourage you because everybody's going to go walk to the
This
town.
isn't really a circle. It's actually done
Yeah.
by actual property lot lines.
Yeah,
You
I don't
tell by
know.
the zigzag that's done. Who came up with this?
I'll make sure to loop, Old Mill.
Yeah. I don't know.
I know what it is.
You can go on the Cape Cod Commission's site and find this map and then sort of scroll down and it explains how it views Osterville and how its computer program, which is, you know, you set your own
Maybe
assumptions.
ask for more specific exact.
Got here.
maps. This is
Yeah.
where they want multifamily going everywhere.
This is, yes, they encourage that in community activity centers. So I share this to say, hey, you know, the concern about the interest in bringing density zoning outside of Hyannis is not sort of made up. It's not straight quotes. It's actually real and encouraged, and it's been worked on over time by both the commission and town staff.
So town staff worked on this with the project commission.
According to this document, if you take this at face value, here the planning director tells the council that they have a document that they worked on with the Cape Cod Commission on form-based zoning for areas like our community activity centers that includes Osterville. I just go with the words, you know. I don't know more than that. So a question is, do you all really want to leave what goes into these footprints that come out of a computer at the Cape Cod Commission up to a developer? As opposed to deciding what does the village want itself to look like 5, 10, 15, 20 years from now, right? And I'm adding this little note on the side when you think about leaving things up to a developer, because it tends to be what this town does, like just let developers do their thing and something will come of it that we might need, maybe. There's a building on Main Street here in Osterville that's in Zone BA, right? Osterville only has Zone BA and RC, which is retail, that's BA, and RC, which is residential. We have a warehouse that's now sitting on a piece of land that was divided between Zone BA and RC. You tell me, leaving development decision and use of land up to a developer, whether that's going to bring us what we need. Right? What we need is housing, and what we have is a warehouse. It's up on Main Street. It's the big gray thing. Yes,
This is 1330 Main. You know where the lake dentistry is?
Yeah.
Okay, and the next building is the
Yeah.
12th building. We used to be in Bench.
Yeah. So I drove by that one day and I was like, what's the warehouse doing here? Right? Like, I've read the zoning code. We don't have warehouses here. We don't have, when zoning allows a use here, it says so. There are elements of our zoning code in Barnstable that allow warehouses. BA isn't one of them. So go figure,
The other
right?
thing I'm sorry to interrupt,
Yeah.
is that the type of building they built required a hazardous materials tank. Okay, and the town building department was supposedly looking at every person going into that building, they're not allowed to use that. Okay, so each of the bays of that building have like, if you want to change your oil, they have a trough that goes down into this hazardous tank. It only has one way in, not a septic tank, it holds hazardous material. Okay, they say, the town says, and Brian Florence, our town building director, said, oh, well, nobody's going to use that. Why don't they allow that, especially when it's right uphill from the main water, and it's inside the wellhead protection?
Yeah.
It's illegal, it's totally illegal.
So
But they allowed that to happen. They gave permission, and we talked to Brian Florence a number of times. And everybody signed off to it. In fact, I talked to the fire department chief at an OBPA meeting one morning. He knew fully nothing about it, so I sent it to him. He never responded. I want to make sure that if something happened there, he actually on the record sent them. They should be monitoring. It's not his fault. Building department allowing that in this zone.
So that's an issue, right? And then there's the zoning piece. That's what we get when you leave development, which is like highest profit to the developer up to the developer on land. I also put a footnote here because I know some of you will care about this. If the town said okay to warehouse use in zone BA, which is retail use, and it's very specific what the retail is. It's exactly what we have in our village center, right? It's little shops and restaurants and so forth. The town says, oh, you can have a warehouse there. The town would not, to my estimation, be allowed to say no to some developer that comes along and wants to turn, Gale's building into a warehouse. I would sue if that were my building and I said, I'm going to make it a warehouse because you let these people make it a warehouse. So that's just a little footnote that I think people should be aware of if you care about the village center and the use of the properties.
Have this tank overflows. The thing is that,
Why is it there?
well,
It's required by the building use. Yeah. But the
building has a farm. Fills up.
Yeah.
It's supposed to happen. With the electricity, that will flow directly downhill to our public source.
Yeah. But so the zone, that's an issue, but the zoning is the issue, right? And do we really want, as is being, advocated, to leave density up to the developer, to leave development, to leave what goes where up to a developer? Because what you get is what is most profitable for the developer. Okay. So this is just a quick, do we have to conform to the regional policy plan? No, we don't. Barnstable is entirely can set its own vision, set its own zoning, set its own, management course. What the town would get by getting LCP certification by the commission is listed here. I'm not going to read that, but it's something you should say, geez, as a resident, does this give me value, right? Does having the Cape Cod Commission do this thing that they're doing at 35 Scudder actually give residents value? You can answer that for yourself. So I'm going to move on quickly now. On town hall and village plans, we all, in general, you were here hearing me at the time, I bet. This is the first time that the town has abandoned village plans in the context of an LCP due to a sewer plan. And those were the words, that's how it was explained by the town in response to questions. For the first time, village plans would be an outcome of the LCP as opposed to an input. When the town was asked about that, the answer was, we're going in a different direction this time. And then when there was a follow-up question a month later, the answer was, we are trying to align the LCP process with the sewer plan. That necessitates that we zoom out from the villages and look at the sewer plan. So it was the first time I heard, geez, this change in the way you approach planning and zoning is driven by sewers. Just that was sort of the explicit and only public answer provided at the time. So I think it's sort of no surprise that before there was a community conversation, before there was even one council discussion, there was a decision to say, we're done with village plans this time. The answer, I think, is unless an Osterville plan chose to take the path of that density zoning that's consistent with the Cape Cod Regional Plan, a village plan would frustrate the intent to go where we just talked about, where the town wants to go to align with that density zoning for the Cape Cod designated community activity centers. There's a slide missing. Rats. Okay, the slide that's missing is an excerpt from minutes of the first LCP meeting, where Elizabeth Jenkins said, I wanted this committee to do this work and not the villages because of the water. It provides, the opportunity for this growth. So that was the other sort of just public record of the tie between sewers and density zoning. That's sort of an explicit mention in the public record. I always like to say that I think if I sound sort of anti-density, I'm not anti-solving the housing crisis. I actually think we should use our houses as homes. There's another quote by our town staff that says, we have an abundant housing stock, we're just not using it to house our local. I think we can do better in solving the housing crisis without sort of wiping out single family zoning or just saying, look, we're going to take development and density decisions and just hand them over to developers. So, okay, that was my presentation, and I appreciate your listening to me, and let me bring facts to you in the event that you want to be paying attention and weighing into the LCP. All right. Thank you.
There's a lot in the mix here that if you're not paying attention, you don't know.
If you go along with the commission, you get their advice.
Hopefully their expertise, there are so many people working in town of Osterville, why do we need somebody else to do it?
Well, it just seems like, do they give you money? Do they funds? They just give you good advice?
I'll jump in. So I think that the package is 35 is overall.
Yeah.
John. Based on everyone's input, and, thank you, Heather, for your overview. From my perspective as a member of the house, I have heard nothing but the unique qualities and special things about each and every one of our villages that we all want to pursue. So I know that the talk has been top down, bottom up, but in the middle, you get to the same place when people go through the process. And I know your process. So I appreciate that. And I think this is part of the process. Lots of questions and thoughts, which we can chat about later in terms of housing. I don't know if housing surveys. Not the most recently, and yes, Felicia has been, most of them have been virtual at most of it, so I see that on. That I think there's a way to bring in some of those housing features to solve some of these issues. But again, from my perspective, nobody wants to change the village of Osterville. I live here, I work, raising my 4 children. When the representative of the historical society and museum and home of the Crosby both, I mean, there's nobody who wants.
Well, I'm thrilled that you're on that. I'm thrilled that Felicia's on it. But when I read and listen to those comments, it's in black and white, and it's really.
Well, I think that it's hard pulling out things without that full context. But I understand what you're saying.
Yeah, it's just a little
you.
PowerPoint.
I hear you.
But it's
Also, we're glad you're on. You understand the motivations of the other people. Many of them don't have the same idea. Sure, you have your conversations, but through the past history, when you see what has been presented here, we've watched what people have said for years here. Many of those people were put directly on that community with different ideas. The question is whether those people will prevail or whether the people who want to keep Osterville and other villages will prevail. The way it's, we saw it was populated,
yeah,
wasn't
John,
a fair way of doing it.
I don't know. To do the fact thing. As I don't want to talk about people's motives because I don't think that's productive. I'd like to talk about what people have said. And what they've said is, I want to bring this density zoning to the community activity center. And we're going to construct a plan so that it can be approved by the Cape Cod Commission. And that is part and parcel. That's the thing.
Right. So I can tell you that from all the meetings and even scheduling. Yeah. But I have never heard that. It is all about keeping this village, our village, unique and everything that we love, which I think we could all agree on. I mean, this is kind of a.
Well, you know what I would love? So could you take all these things, what people have actually said, and come back and say, no, this is what they're meant, right? Despite the word. Because my concern is the word. Right? Don't conform to this respect the village. Right? They just don't. They just don't.
I think there's a disconnect. Right?
Well, I think, and I hear you. I see that there could be a disconnect in some of these cases. I would say that you are a public speaker. That is a rare thing. There are many people who are not as eloquent when they're speaking in public, and they may ramble on and say things that they didn't necessarily mean to say or didn't understand the implications. We won't see.
No, but this is our senior town staff.
Right.
Right in that job.
That, again, and I know you've been at some of our meetings as well, and John, you've been. I think that, again, from my perspective, all the meetings, all the outreach, today were the last.
That was the last one, yeah.
The last one, which was fabulous.
Yeah, it was pretty good.
It was really great because it was just an open discussion. It wasn't a PowerPoint. It wasn't a lecture. It wasn't a whatever. It was just people saying, hey, this is what I think. And I live on this road. And you live on that road. These shared connections.
Do you think that what happened that evening, which was a real demonstration of why people love living in Osterville? I don't want to live in downtown.
Right.
I live in Osterville because I chose this village. I was thrilled to find a house I could afford in this village. Do you think that spirit, that conversation that happened will be translated back to this process?
That is the only spirit that I have encountered in this whole LPP process. Meeting the other people from other villages. Everybody wants to protect and preserve what is unique about their village. And yet we realize that we're all part of a bigger town of Barnstable, that these are the pieces to a larger entity.
But why change the zoning if the village doesn't want the zoning change?
Exactly. I only did this because every time I say, this is what our town hall is saying to us,
Right.
I get accused of being a misinformation spreader, and I'm not.
Right.
And I am exceptionally diligent, and I read everything.
Oh,
And so it's like, I'm not making stuff up, I'm not exaggerating, I'm listening really hard to what town hall said. And I put it together so that everybody else doesn't have to spend 20 hours a week listening to really uninteresting to the population.
well, I appreciate that. And again, I know you are brilliant and eloquent in your presentation, and your research and depth of knowledge on this.
How are you gonna reconcile that?
Yeah, but that's one reason I did that.
You're the LCP.
Well, you know what, I love a link to that map. Just so I can look at it up close, because I think it would be interesting to see. You and I talked, so we're aligned on the zoning. I just think that there's a way to meet in the middle rather than having, defensive stance here and a defensive stance here and nobody's talking. I'd rather have more meetings like we had the other day with people talking. I think this is a great group. This is a group where we can all share these and, in the end, make a difference.
But it's because the LCP, they totally conform with the LCP. So therefore, they're putting this out.
Well,
Okay, are you going to conform to them or are they conforming?
my understanding is that we independently come up with recommendation, long range planning, based on all of the information that we're gathering from everybody. And then that final report, which we haven't even gotten to, we're still in the outreach meeting with these. I can tell you that they have had to date 1,000 responses to the survey online. You're a person, I'm a numbers person. So 1,000 responses online. In the next few days, every mailbox within the town of Hartsville will receive a postcard. If you haven't already, lately, so I don't think I've got with that survey, and put all of this in writing. Fill out that survey. They do listen. People do take it, and put everything that we talked about here tonight in those surveys, in that response that we want to keep on. We don't want. I don't know where to go.
Sort of zoning sort of weird, sort of really weird in the context of all. So you go to my sister lives in Texas, you go to these little places that are form-based zoning because they used to be a field. Here, if you say, okay, you're building, you have the flexibility to add height and all this, but piece building doesn't, it's just weird. To sort of overlay it in existing development. It's why other towns, I think, have said no to it. Right? If they're increasingly saying no, it got sort of rebranded.
A question for Paul.
Yeah.
I think it comes down to soaring, which is gonna increase the density. That's what everyone is paranoid. But once you get the building, you don't want. What's to stop the density? What's to start? I've asked Mike Eldridge before. He won't answer. You have soaring in Osterville. Do we have any thing over the zone? Density. Yes. We're paranoid. But once you have the sewers, then it's the gates open up. That's my opinion.
If you let the developers make the decisions. Yeah.
And
That's my opinion.
the only thing I've heard about the sewering is that, this is a way to get the sewers faster to Marston's Mill. That it's everything from the estuary that's coming down towards us. That's a road, westward, that, we can make a big difference. That's what I've heard as resident of Osterville, not
But that's got nothing to do with zoning.
right.
That's got to do with the wind development.
Well,
That's supposedly, but
right, so that's why I don't see the connection with zoning.
there isn't.
Well, no,
Really?
with the sewers going down to try to get to Marston. From my understanding, at Marstonville, this goes back to the proper days of, you know, I can hear him saying something about the estuary, everything flowing this, that. Problem is, and so if we can deal with everything in Marston Mills, we have a much better, healthier basis here. Again, I'm no. water.
If that's the case, why aren't they content with going up the Route 28? I mean, just go up 28. You're in Marstonville. I'm not sure why Osterville Village has to be a part of that, for that.
What they're doing is making these, they're gonna pay.
Okay. I think the survey that's going out in the mail, how long are they giving people to respond to that? How long is it going to be kept open?
Know that there's a deadline, but I can look into that. It's been open since November. And it's open now, I can forward you that.
I've got the
Okay.
link and stuff,
Okay.
my wife set up. I'm just curious when they're going this out to the public through the mail, are they giving people a time frame? Or how long it's left open?
Yeah.
Because I heard one place I heard it was closing in mid-January. You're just mailing things out in the mail now, and I know I didn't get it in the mail yet.
Right.
If I get the next 2 or 4 days, that doesn't give people much time to complete it if it's mid-January. I would hope they're keeping it open for at least 6 weeks.
Oh, I agree, especially for people who may not be here right now. So I would assume that they would continue that survey, but I can ask and find out.
Are you encouraged the committee members to make sure that it is?
Sure, absolutely. And you know what, through this process, one thing I learned is that the date keeps extending and expanding. And I think just by the natural delays with the system, I would think that they would have to.
So I will send you the map, and I would also love if there's sort of specific rationale about why those words aren't words that we should be concerned about.
Yes.
Explain them,
Let's do it.
because I
Let's
worry
figure it
about.
out. It's work. Well, stuff. I mean, this is our ability.
Privilege unless you have more than that. That's what the commission is doing, that's what county is doing. Why is that matter anywhere out there? Okay, and there's also the Association to Preserve Cape Cod. They had a map that was similar. Who these people decide where density development is going to be versus villages and people live there? This is the problem.
Well, and I think this is the opportunity we have as the village association to be able to say, hey, we want Osterville the way it is. We are fine with our zoning as is. Don't change it. I think that in the 2010 report, and I brought my files with me, but not the 2010 report, most recent meeting details. You know, one of the things that came out of that was that sidewalks on East Bay Road would be a great idea. Well, now I think they're, you know, moving forward with sidewalks on East Bay Road. So those are the things that can happen. Or stay the same and preserve about.
Well, when we have our first meeting, I'm sorry, we have a first meeting on the LCP. The very first thing out of the chairman of that your committee said was about changing zoning. The very first thing. Okay. And from what I see, this high density is going to be developed. And what we're going to get, I don't know what other villages do. We're going to get higher restriction levels in the middle of the village. We're going to get high-end Airbnb. Okay, and that's what we're going to get because that's the biggest buck for developers. Okay, so when I hear that gentleman come up and say the person we were talking about is changing zoning, okay, he's in the business of Airbnb. That's what I worry about. He's the chairman of your committee.
So what I heard is that he, I believe, said that in the last report that came out in 2010, Osterville didn't have any specifics with regard to zoning that the other villages did, and that if we want to.
Not true.
Well, I know
We have zoning here, we always. we didn't do, when I was involved in it, LCP, so was Chuck, and a lot of people didn't. That never came up because we were pleased with our zoning the way it was. Okay,
So
his answer was, oh, you didn't have any changes, so therefore we have to go back and look at what you didn't do it in the last LCP. And it's like, where do you get that from?
So this is where I would love to be the mediator, and I think what I heard from him, and what I believe to be so, serving on the committee, is that they're asking for this commentary from the villages and from the residents to say, how do you want to see Osterville? How do you want to see Barnes in 5, 10?
So that was village, change village plans and being out to the else.
Because if you see a glass half full, I see glass half empty. It's a different way of looking at things. But I think that this is an opportunity to bridge that, to have us all on the same page. I really do. We all love Osterville. I mean, the history here is something nobody wants to change. Nobody wants to change. I mean, 5, 10 years ago, we all went to the Barnstable Historical Commission fighting for a gas station. Who would think that you would go to fight for a gas station? And we did, because that's part of the story of Osterville, the fabric of a small seaside village, which is robustly built with businesses and residents and commerce at the boatyard and
Tours.
well, tourists.
It's a vacation destination.
It is, that's why we love it, because we can enjoy it all year round. But we want to keep it that way and not have it overrun with, mega tour bus.
Right, the fellow who moderated the history.
Right.
I think he did a fabulous job, and I don't want to disparage anyone else, but the night that they came here, it was a disaster.
It was awful.
And I think that sort of experience
It was
just injects so much poison into the conversation. So I would think about two things. Who presents this to the very, the people in the villages?
Yeah.
And B, what happened that evening at the History Museum gets translated and reported back.
Right.
Because, it was a great conversation. I loved seeing everybody, meeting everybody, but so what happens with it?
Who was the person who moderated?
Yeah, it was.
Thank
Jim.
Yes.
Now, does he report to Elizabeth Jenkins? He does.
But you know what? I totally agree with you. I think that the presentation, and whenever I see the movie like the PowerPoint or work, we don't want to talk. I think it's in the connection of the conversation that we gain something. And when we have the PowerPoint, and that PowerPoint presentation from that night was something that you would see.
It was painful.
Forgive me, it was painful, and it was something to see at the council meeting. And
Well, not to mention the fact that SWOT analyses are so yesterday. I mean, no one does that anymore, and we got through this. It was just a disaster.
Well,
The thing is, they weren't going after the issues we're talking about.
Yeah.
They make these things up. Serial things. You like your village, what do you like it? I like the swimming pool. I like the UC. That's not what we're talking about. Okay, it seems what it is put together not to get any particular issue settled.
it goes back to someone eloquent and dives right in and jumps to the issue versus somebody who may not be, used to presenting to an audience who may not be favorable from the start.
I'm more cynical, I'm sorry, but I thought that was a way not to get the issue that we wanted to talk about and present something that we want you to have. 2 years down the road, then we're gonna railroad it through and never listen to people.
It would
That's
be
the
perfect. That presentation. I myself jumped right in. And I think that's where the opportunity is. And you may be pessimistic, but I have enough optimism to meet in the middle somewhere. So I would love to continue this in the interest of time. I know it's really late. That if the 3 of us, 4 of us, however many of us to get together, I'd love to do that, you know.
And I would love to be wrong. I'd love to be wrong about what I hear. And you're making me feel better, but I still hear what I hear.
I think PowerPoint presentations are great as long as the presenter doesn't stand there and read 5 bullets on every slide. That's just so. So yours was great. Thank you.
I think there is, I don't want to be insightful, but there is definitely an attitude nationally promoted by professional planners and by members of certain political affiliations to eliminate single-family housing and to single-family housing zones. They see this as the nemesis of affordable housing. That this is the root cause why we don't have affordable housing. And I think there's some truth to that when you limit zoning to single-family residential districts, you're obviously, in many ways, eliminating the prospect of having affordable housing. So it's a difficult balance to achieve. One of the things you have to be very cautious about, a little bit off subject, but these planners is that they like to create things the way, I'll use this amorphous pronoun they see things. I'll give an example of this. Something, if you look at Hyannis, the zoning that they've developed in the village of Hyannis, they have made that zoning in Hyannis is now, I would say, almost incomprehensible. I don't know whether you agree or not yet. But if you look at the zoning bylaw that applies to the village of Hyannis, there are more districts there than there were republics in the Soviet Union. and you never know from what from 1 minute to the next what's changing and what isn't. I'll give you an example of there's an area on Pearl Street in Hyannis, where Baxter's Boathouse is. And there's something in there about that you can have multifamily housing if it's for artists. Go ahead and look it up. I'm not making this up. And there's a definition of what an artist is. So somebody got this great idea that Pearl Street would be a wonderful area to have an artist colony. That's obviously what they were thinking. Now, I grew up in Hyannis. I don't remember any artists in Hyannis, let alone the name Pearl Street. So somebody came up with this idea that we're going to make this an artist colony. And something else that they did when they've now created a transportation zone near where the bus station is and where they're redoing all that stuff where the trains are. And what they did there is they wiped out certain retail pre-existing uses. So there was a block of buildings in there where there were retail uses. Now they're still lawful if they continue, but once you stop for any period of time, I think it's 2 years or 3 years, you lose the protection of being a pre-existing non-conforming use. Because somebody got the idea that we should create a transportation district that's limited only to things that involve transportation. And if you read the list, it's like, this idyllic view of like bicycle rental shops and all this other stuff, none of which exists. So, they have these crazy ideas about zoning, and what I would really not like to see, in addition to the housing issue, which definitely is on the table with the planning department, no question about that, is cutting Osterville up into these multifarious zones that have no basis in reality and don't really relate to the way things really are in the village. And I'll just leave with this final thought, because I monopolized this whole thing tonight. I usually like to just get home so I can watch Tucker. But anyway, the
Celtics.
So now you know where I'm coming from. But anyway, I remember a friend of mine years ago was hired by a consortium of banks and developers to oppose the creation of the Cape Cod Commission. And he would go to these town forums, and there would be the advocates for the Cape Cod Commission, there would be planners, and there would be my friend. And one of the things he always said, very true, he said, with planners, if you had planners in the 19th century, you would not have Osterville. You wouldn't have the village of Osterville. You wouldn't have the village of Barnstable. You wouldn't have Main Street Cinema. What you would have would be strip mall. Because that's what planners like. They like to have plenty of parking and we would never have the center that we have today if this was planned out, if somebody planned it. We wouldn't have it.
Oh, let me read you something from the newspaper, the Epic Times, who posted before the last presidential one, all the platforms of both parties. Under housing, under Joe Biden, was withhold federal funds from states that repeal zoning regulations with emphasis on ending single family housing. Democratic Party platform from last election, put it in the paper. So yes, there is a move, and this move here. And it seems like all planning people get the same thing, they go to the same schools, they get the same publications, and that's what they're planning here. On that note, can we move on? I wanted to set up the one thing I had from new business was the bylaws committee. We need to relook at our bylaws. Last time we did was 2000. We're looking at 3 to 4 members that would like to be on that committee. Do you have any volunteers? Pete? You gotta be on the Heather, Chuck would be interested. Okay,
I would not like to be on it, but I will be.
Yeah. Yes, we will. Also, you're going to send us the information on Dowson's Beach. Can you send it?
It's on my phone.
Okay, and if we, Chuck, if we do something, do you want to be on the committee? If not, can we run it by you before it's done?
Yeah, I'll be on the committee.
Okay.
As I said, I don't want to be on it. Well,
Okay, there you go. Okay, thanks. Anything else before we adjourn? It's been a long meeting.
2 days. One is to attend virtually or in person the end of January on the LFD house. 200,000 each for home. To you right now.
Why did you?
You see, so is happening, and the Rihanna post office is coming to Osterville for a trip. It was scheduled for tomorrow. It is not tomorrow. It will be most likely a week from tomorrow. Delaying, so stay tuned. I'd like to see that. I'd also love to be on the agenda for the Robert Smith Fund for the Rihanna post office project. I can send you a letter here that works.
You don't know what that is.
Oh, the Rihanna post office. So in the mid 1970s, there was a small Rihanna post office opened up in 1875, approximately the Dakota Chestnut House. Continued on as a post office for the Rihanna district. They had their own post. And the building was eventually fell into disrepair and wasn't used as a post office anymore. And for a flip of a coin, Hobart Davis lost the flip of the coin, and for $1, the post office was taken by Bobby Hayden over to Katuitt, 86 Putnam Avenue. And if any of you know Bob Hayden, federal student, quite character. So he pulled the plug on the move at the 11th hour today for tomorrow, but we're on for next Wednesday. Again, given Bobby Hayden. It will be coming to the museum and the foundation between the Hammond House and Parker House, very small foundation. It's about 20 by 20 with a beautiful little porch on it. Has good bones, original post office boxes with the original family name on those stuff. The postal, post originally, Necco wafers in the summer. Yeah, so our grand opening, Villanelle Necco wafer. So stay tuned, but I will tell you more and I'll email you here about. Are you going to video? Oh, yeah.
how much did Bob sell it there?
Oh, so. He wrote it down in chalk on the picnic table at the museum, and I sure that and he was talking. I actually reported probably fine with him, but between those chalk pictures and his business, I think we have a contract. So I'm not sure legal muster and our esteemed lawyers in the audience, but he's fabulous. He's fabulous. So stay tuned for that. And also, Osterville has a new Blount Cane recipient. Our 86th Blount Cane recipient is Edna Finn. She would be proud to say 95 years young. She is, and she's been engaged.
And that leads me to the other, just to have in a minute, of the passing of our very sweet community healer who passed away at the event. 101. And I am happy to say I was able to meet with her many times and record her stories of Osterville, because she was sharp as a tack and loved Osterville and sent us videos from Florida. So also good things. And embarrassing.
Next meeting is, next meeting is February 6th. Thank you.